Okay, this is a 427 medium riser that's in the car, which has pretty good value by itself. And then the cool thing is that they saved the original numbers matching engine with the VIN stamp on it, and it's on the engine stand behind the car.
I drove that from California with the 2 girls and the 2 dogs.
She was driving to come here.
Yeah, in '72. It got a little too hot and it threw a rot.
Okay, so did you change the engine out in this car then?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was a problem because I was still trucking, and you have to keep going. And
it's got the original transmission, up the PGB-W tag. The engine that's in the car has got all the original brackets, so like all the engine component mounting brackets, like the power steering bracket. The smog pump bracket is there, but there's no smog pump.
Okay.
We've got the original fan clutch. We've got the original fan shroud, which is not broken, and these fan shrouds are impossible to find today. Just impossible. The air cleaner, he added a ram air system, but he kept the original air cleaner. And so that's the original lid, which is not like reproduction lids. And here's the original date code is still stamped in the base. And so the base is really the equity part that you can't reproduce. So this is the original intake, and it's still painted blue just like it was originally. The original throttle linkage is here. There's the return spring bracket for the carburetor return. And you see it's got this little machined hole here, so this vacuum port sees signal from both sides. It's all unique to a GTE Cougar, and this is absolutely the right stuff that you want to see.
Well, part of it we couldn't drive it because
we were on the road.
Yeah.
Come home and
we kept thinking we're going to be able to get off the road and then I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fix it the way it's supposed to be. It's not major stuff.
Another interesting thing, Jerry, this, we call it a U-tube. See right here? I know you're going to put this on YouTube, but that's a U-tube. Anyway, that thing is unique to either a 428 Shelby or this Cougar GTE. That's the only 2 cars that use that part. And all that's the original stuff. And they reproduce it today, but having the original is always better than the reproduction.
When you hear this guy talking like this, don't you see that this car went to the right person? If you just got somebody here to know anything about it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This is absolutely why, it's going to somebody that will bring the car back to where it should be. It's very amazing because he widened the rims. There were so many times that he could have cut the car, cut the rear end.
Yeah, he actually had the original rims widened to 10 inches wide, and he was going to have to hack the wheel wells up on the car.
But never did it.
Thankfully, you made the right decision not to do that, because that would have hurt the value of the car immensely.
I know.
And then the other decision was keeping the original engine and having the original engine repaired. That original engine, it doubles the value of the car. Okay, the original build tag is still attached to the radiator core support. And if you take a look over at the far right-hand side of the radiator core support, that thing has codes on it that tell the workers that this is a GTE, and so it has to have the silver lower body. It tells them that it has an AM/FM radio.
Well, something else that we loved about the car is it's got a really nifty sound system. It just would blow you out of the car.
So along the top here, it's got the VIN number of the car.
And does it say GTE there?
It says it has a W as the 5th character in the VIN, which is the 427 engine code. And only the GTE was available with that 427W engine code.
So what'd you find there, Royce?
So,
Address, 1507 Biggin Avenue, Mountain View, California.
that's your owner card that the dealer gave him when he bought the car.
Oh,
And you
okay. I've
remember-
never seen that before.
Remember little Dymo label makers?
No.
They used to have a thing that looked like a gun, and you pull the trigger and make sticky labels with.
Oh,
And it makes these little letters.
I never did go down to the dealers until I finally gave up and signed the papers.
What we got here?
So that's the original owner's manual from the glove compartment. So when he bought this car new, the dealer had him give him the information of what his address was, what his name was, and it's the purchase date here, May 20th, 1968, is when this was written. On the emblem, people break the tail off a lot of times because they don't realize that there's nuts on the backside holding it onto the car and pry it off thinking it's just on push pins. Okay, so the engine is the original engine that came in this car, and we can tell that because of the date code on the engine and then the features of the engine. The side oil passage is visible on the side of the block. So the top one is a side oil passage, and there's a Allen plug that plugs the hole where a drill bit went all the whole length of the block to make that passage. The bottom one has got a valve and a relief spring in it, and when this thing gets up to about 70 psi, that valve opens, and that's the last place in the oil system. Okay, so everything else in the engine has gotten oil before that thing opened. Okay, so the engine has the casting feature of a 427 on the right-hand cylinder bank under the intake manifold. Yeah, and this 427 shows the guys at the foundry that this has a thick enough cylinder wall to make the big bore 4.23 bore size for 427. And then the other thing it's got on the rear bulkhead of the block, there's a what they call a scratch mark. And at the foundry, there was a couple of different scratch marks that were used on the Cougar GTE. This one has an I. Some of them have an F, some of them have a G, some of them have an H. But this particular one has an I. It's a very
okay.
And so there's the I that's scratched in at the foundry, and that was scratched into the pattern that was used to make this rear bulkhead of this 427 side oiler block. Now, up underneath here, you got to shoot from underneath the engine, is the date code. Yeah, it's not that the engine by itself is worth a whole lot.
Yeah.
It's came with that car when it was new. And
Yeah, it did.
having the original engine is the difference between this car and 90% of the rest of them. Most of them don't have the original engines.
Right.
So what do you got in here, the heads?
Yeah. So the problem is there's a little bit of surface rust on here.
Uh-huh.
We cleaned it off with some Windex and a rag, but it's right along this bottom edge of the cylinder head. If you take a picture of it, you can kind of see it on the picture.
Okay.
And then the other thing, there's a casting number on the head, which is up here. And then there's a date code on the cylinder head up here. But by all three of those things, they all tell you that these are GTE cylinder heads for 427.
Can you tell me what the number is on the head here? What the code?
So the casting number is a C8 OE 6090-N, and that sounds like it's a Cobra jet head, but the way this head is machined, it's machined with a 14-bolt exhaust pattern, so it fits the 390 style exhaust manifolds that they used on this 427 GTE. And the date code on these heads is it's a 8B2, so it's February of 1968. So it was made. This head was made, I think, about a week before the car, if I remember right.
Okay, so
And so then you want to take a picture of the VIN number back here.
yeah, and it just has the whole VIN or the last 6 digits.
It's got the year, which is an 8. It's got the assembly plant, which is an F, and then it's got the sequential VIN number, which is 6 digits.
Okay. So it's really hard to see that, but it's there.
Whenever we get the heads rebuilt, they'll hot tank the heads with they put a caustic soda in there and they heat it up to about 300 degrees, and all the rust will disappear off of here, and you'll be able to see it just fine then.
Okay. Go ahead.
So these heads were drilled for smog, and the smog holes have been plugged here because he removed the pollution control stuff shortly after he got the car.
So what you're saying, if you tried to find a set of these heads like this, you'd look forever.
You would look forever, and then if you did find them, you'd pay dearly. They're very hard to find.
It's just what you need.
You gonna try and go see it later, or when they get it done, or?
If we ever get to Seattle, people drive them and things happen.
They did just like you. They raced them and they beat them hard and they had fun with them.
Yeah.
Well, I did that to a point, but I'm a female. I wouldn't be doing
Well, our oldest daughter was racing boys all the time. I mean, and we finally, I had, there's a place up in Oklahoma City that did work on race cars, and so there was a little Ford company here, and he got me the block, and I says I want a good crankshaft, and he says, well, I'll get you a NASCAR one, and he says, well, then I'll do it, and so that was it, and so I got all the rest of the stuff and put on it, and I had it running, and look at it now.
Well, when you're young.